what are the symptoms that people that are suffering from that you say, hey, this sounds like your thyroid?
Well, all the typical ones that most suffering from, which is you can't lose weight, you can't sleep, you're completely exhausted, you have anxiety and depression, you have brain fog, so all of those same symptoms. But the crazy thing is most people, they start with some of those symptoms. And usually what I see is low thyroid typically turns on after the birth of a child. Now, certainly there are many people that have low thyroid and it contributes to infertility. But what we're seeing is that the number one cause of low thyroid is autoimmunity.
I'm really excited today to share Dr. Heather Stone's story as a doctor of chiropractic, sharing her knowledge in functional medicine and healing through many modalities, especially in the thyroid healing way. Dr. Stone is one of the top functional medicine practitioners in the world with over 20 years of clinical experience in private practice. During that time, she has successfully helped thousands of women overcome the symptoms of hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Her thyroid transformation blueprint has been used by hundreds of doctors, helping countless women achieve happiness, health, and lean physique. Dr. Stone's mission is to revolutionize healthcare through her private practice, books, master classes, webinars, education programs, and retreats on her ranch in Texas. As one of the most experienced clinicians in the field of hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, she is dedicated to helping women regain their health through a clinical model that addresses the root cause of disease. She takes an exhaustive investigative approach to understand the underlying causes of her patients' problems and works diligently to customize treatment plans that address their unique needs. Throughout her career, Dr. Stone has been instrumental in showing tens of thousands of patients how to successfully treat long-standing health issues, focusing particularly on women who suffer from hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. Dr. Stone is renowned for her bedside manner, which is easygoing, supportive, optimistic, and delivered with a touch of Southern charm. Patients often become part of her extended family, sharing moments of laughter and joy in her office. When she is not working, Dr. Stone enjoys reading, meditating, cooking, dining out at great restaurants, and traveling the world. She is married and a mother of her 2 sons, Cam and Cannon, as well as her 2 dogs, Emma and Bella. Again, we welcome Dr. Stone to Kilt's Carnivore Conversations. Dr. Heather Stone, welcome. So glad you're here with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm visiting Austin, Texas. I'm meeting so many amazing people. It's a great culture, great town. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living, for fun. I don't know if that's the right word there, but what's your specialty in life?
Yeah, so I work with women who have low thyroid, mostly women who are dealing with Hashimoto's and autoimmunity. I personally have struggled with thyroid issues, which is what makes me really passionate about this space. And then, of course, I'm a rancher farmer, which is, unusual for most people that know me. But, you are what you eat. And so the more that you get into, health and wellness, and then, so regenerative farming has become another passion for me.
You said you are what you eats. What do you mean by that?
So for a long time, we've always heard you are what you eat. But if you think about you are what you eat, well, what is the quality of the food that you're eating, right? So if it's the animal that you're eating, how was the animal actually raised? Were they raised on, grass that was loaded with glyphosate and all kinds of chemicals and herbicides and pesticides? And was the animal that you're eating, are they loaded with hormones and antibiotics? And were they on a feedlot? So the quality of the meat that you're eating, the quality of of the food is actually what matters.
Mm. What about a mom who's breastfeeding? And is what they eat matter to what that baby is eating?
Absolutely. I just find it so cool because, you know, I think they've studied a lot in breast milk about not only the nutrients and the health of the mom and what the mom's eating, but even like mindset of the mom and meditation literally changes the breast milk. And it's so cool because they've done a lot of studies, and I don't have to tell you this, but on breast milk and what the baby needs. And like there's so much information exchange when the baby is nursing from the mom. Like the fat content and the nutrient content of the milk changes based on what the baby needs, but it's got to get it from somewhere.
So my daughter just delivered her first child.
Oh, how exciting.
And 3 weeks old today, Julio. And she's breastfeeding, and she's amazing, first mom. And I think this is such an important part of this discussion is, number one, women are so important, obviously, in our culture. And I consider women the leaders of the household and the leaders of the family. And what are women suffering from that's really brought them down in so many ways?
Well, in my opinion, especially working with so many women, I feel like we have this expectation that we're supposed to be taking care of everybody else, and it's socially acceptable to put ourselves and our own health on the back burner. And I always tell people and tell women that your health has to be your number one priority. Because if your health isn't your number one priority, how can you show up 100% for everybody else in your life? You come to the table tired, exhausted, depressed, anxious. And so, but then we start to feel bad if we put our health as our number one priority. It's almost seen like we are being selfish instead of selfless. And that putting your health as your number one priority is one of the most selfless things that you can possibly do. And I think another thing is the women, which is why I really love working with women, is because we have the biggest circle of influence. Like you're saying, we lead the household, and we lead the household in nutrition, what our kids eat, what our kids are watching, how they're spending their day. And a lot of women, when we are working on changing their diet, they feel bad because they can't eat what their children are eating. And I'm like, how about we change what your children are eating?
Who's responsible
I'm
for
like,
that one?
hello. So, I think the worst thing ever is that we have a kids menu. I don't even know who decided to have a kids menu. I'm like, have you seen what's on the children's menu? My kids, and I have 2 boys. One is now 21 and 18 now. So when they were little, I'm like, you guys, you don't have to eat off the kids menu because you're big. They're like, really? We don't have to eat off the kids menu? I'm like, no. So what you get to do is you get to choose what protein do you want, and we're going to put it with a vegetable. And that's what we're going to eat. But you get to order off the big kids menu, the adult menu, and you get to share it. I said, or we can just make up our own thing that we want and just tell them how to order it. And so I always positioned it differently so that they felt special and not deprived. But we should not feel bad if we're not allowing our children to eat junk food. So it's our responsibility to make sure that not only is our health really great, but we're giving our children a healthy childhood as well.
What are women suffering from? What are the causes? What type of problems are they having today?
Well, I think the biggest symptoms and the things that they're suffering from that I see the most, because I'm really in the thyroid world, but it's fatigue, it's insomnia, they can't fall asleep, or maybe if they do fall asleep, they wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep. They have anxiety, they have depression, they have major brain fog, they are really suffering with weight loss, like they can't lose weight. And I think it's something like the last statistic I saw was about 74% of Americans are overweight or obese. So we're struggling with all these things, but because we also have a bunch of responsibilities, we just keep pushing through. We just keep pushing through to make sure that we're doing a job, keeping all the balls in the air and doing the things that we're supposed to do, but we're just wearing ourselves out.
thyroid disease is rampant, and what I see, it's one of the number one diseases and the number one prescription written in this country and maybe even the world. What's going on?
Well, it's hard to know exactly what's going on because I don't necessarily think the studies would help. Nobody wants to really know what's going on because it's the number one prescribed medication, or at least one of the top ones. But I think what we are seeing is that the incidence of hypothyroid is growing exponentially, and you can pretty much put it with our toxic load and, all the pesticides and chemicals. Same with diabetes and blood sugar. Like you can literally put it on that same graph and it's growing at the same rate. So when we have major toxic load, when we have autoimmunity, those things is what really pushing low thyroid.
What are the symptoms that people that are suffering from that you say, hey, this sounds like your thyroid?
Well, all the typical ones that we're most suffering from, which is you can't lose weight, you can't sleep, you're completely exhausted, you have anxiety and depression, you have brain fog, so all of those same symptoms. But the crazy thing is most people, they start with some of those symptoms. And usually what I see is low thyroid typically turns on after the birth of a child. Now, certainly there are many people that have low thyroid and it contributes to infertility. But what we're seeing is that the number one cause of low thyroid is autoimmunity, Hashimoto's. And that usually turns on after the birth of a child because we have big shifts in our hormones, and that can trigger autoimmunity. And you don't just all of a sudden get low thyroid when Hashimoto's turns on. You get all of these symptoms. And you actually, if you have Hashimoto's, you don't show low thyroid. It can be for months, it can be for years, but you've been suffering with all of these symptoms and they're like, well, nothing's really wrong with you yet. Keep coming back. And once you actually see that your TSH is high, then we'll diagnose you with low thyroid, which is similar to my story. I was in college and I could not lose weight. I had fatigue. I was going to school, but I was unusually tired. And this was my pre-med days. And I was like, man, something is not right. So one of my friends, her dad was a doctor, and he's like, oh, we'll get you into the best OB-GYN in Austin. I'm like, okay. I'm ready. Like, I got to figure this out. So I go in and I don't know anything. And this is pre-Google. So there was no Dr. Google. It was textbooks.
Right.
And I'm like,
Yep.
okay, I think I might have low thyroid, but I did not know anything. So I go in and I say, I think I've got low thyroid. Can you check it? And he's like, sure, we'll check your thyroid. There was really no other exam. It's like, I'll check your thyroid. And at the time, I didn't know to look at my own labs. I just, went in a week later and he's like, yeah, nothing's wrong. I think that I did not have a menstrual cycle. And he said, I think you don't have a menstrual cycle because you exercise too much. And I was like, I'm 50 pounds overweight. Like, I knew enough to know, like, if you over exercise and your body fat goes down to like 10%, you're going to have issues with your menstrual cycle. But he said that, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And he said, oh, by the way, as he's walking out, he's like, you're going to have issues with fertility. So whenever you're ready to get pregnant, just come back and we can do fertility treatment. And I was like, okay. First of all, I was upset. And then I was like, as the years went on, I'm like, I am very blessed to have had that experience because I didn't believe him when he said, you don't have a period or a menstrual cycle because you were exercising too much. So I'm grateful for that because everything else that he said was not true for me. So I did not believe that I was going to have fertility issues. I said there's something else going on here that I have to figure out, which is what led me down this path. And so eventually, after I had babies, which I had them naturally, all of a sudden, because I was looking at my labs, I was super hyperthyroid. And I'm like, oh, I know that this is not normal. Let's run my antibodies. And certainly I had Hashimoto's. And so about 90 to 98% of women who have low thyroid actually have Hashimoto's.
So you're hypothyroid Is that what you said?
Well, after I had children, I went into hyperthyroid.
Hyperthyroid. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because the immune system attacks the thyroid and you release all these thyroid hormones. But I had all the low thyroid symptoms before that.
Okay. Okay.
And then, so with Hashimoto's, you fluctuate. It just depends on if the immune system is attacking the thyroid or not. And you go through different triggers and different flare-ups and things like that.
Could you tell us a little bit about the thyroid gland and some of the hormones and what they do?
Yes. So the thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland at the base of your neck. And essentially, the main function of the thyroid is to regulate your metabolic rate. And so the thyroid gland makes mostly T4 hormone. And then the body has to convert that into T3 hormone, which happens outside of the thyroid, mostly in the liver. It can happen in the gut, other tissues in the body. And T3 is the active form of thyroid hormone. And that's what the body uses to regulate your metabolic rate. Now, it also impacts estrogen, progesterone, and it helps with ovulation and all of that stuff. And the thyroid is pretty cool. It's one of the only hormones that has receptor sites at every single cell in the body from head to toe, which is why you get such a huge variety of symptoms when you're dealing with low thyroid.
And so what's causing this? Do we know the cause of low or high thyroid problems?
So essentially, hypothyroid is mostly caused by autoimmunity. Mostly.
Okay.
80 to 98%, I think the studies are now showing. So what this means is the immune system is tagging your thyroid tissue for destruction. So essentially, it's destroying the thyroid. And over time, when it's destroyed enough of the thyroid tissue, your thyroid can no longer keep up with thyroid hormone production. So that's when we move into hypothyroid. Now, in the beginning, when this turns on, you can move into a hyperthyroid state. Sometimes we don't even recognize it unless it's like a major thyroid storm. You know, for me, I was thin. I lost a lot of weight right after I had a baby, and I didn't necessarily feel bad. I was like, sweet. But, you know, as you were looking at labs and looking to optimize your health, you're like, oh, this is not good, actually. But so you can go in and out of hyper and hypothyroid. And this is why a lot of women really struggle to get their TSH stable, is because they're trying to stabilize their TSH with thyroid hormones only, when they have this autoimmune condition going on underneath the surface. And there's a bunch of different triggers that will trigger the immune system to actually attack the thyroid.
Do we know what environmental factors or dietary factors may help or hurt the thyroid gland?
Yes. So if we're talking about autoimmunity, the main triggers that we see, number one, and is the biggest one, is insulin surges. Insulin resistance, insulin surges. So anytime you eat bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, cookies, cakes, candy, even some most starchy vegetables, you're going to have a spike in your blood sugar. And that releases insulin, and insulin surges make the immune system attack the thyroid if you have Hashimoto's. The other thing that people, especially women, don't get is if they don't eat often enough or they fast too long and they go into hypoglycemia, they're still getting these insulin surges. Or we will have blood sugar variability, where we're like go down into hypoglycemia, liver dumps sugar into the bloodstream, then we got to pump out insulin to get it into the cell. So then you go into hyperglycemia, high blood sugar. So you're doing this up and down all day long, and you have a lot of blood sugar variability. And with all that blood sugar variability, you are creating insulin surges. So we could probably talk for hours on blood sugar, but this is probably the number one thing that I think a lot of people miss, is they don't ever balance their blood sugar. Because when we're trying to lose weight, we don't understand the mechanism how the body gains weight, and we don't understand all the impacts of what causes blood sugar to go up or down. And in the world of intermittent fasting, I was guilty of this. I knew that I probably shouldn't intermittent fast for long periods of time, but I did it because it was the thing. So I'm like, oh, sweet. Eating is annoying to me because I'm working all day and I can fast better than anybody. So I started doing the intermittent fasting. And I had looked at my labs before I started that. And my A1C was a 5.3, which is really good. So your A1C, just for people that don't know, it's called hemoglobin A1C. It's a 90-day average of your blood sugar. Like tells us how good and in control your blood sugar is for the most part. So it's just an average. So mine was a 5.3, which is good. That's pretty optimal. So I started intermittent fasting, and I would eat dinner around 6, and then I would eat lunch when I got a lunch break, which was anywhere from 1 to 2. So I had like a 4-hour eating window. So I would say maybe an 18-hour fast. So I did it for a while, and I didn't feel bad. I felt fine. And so after 3 months, I wasn't losing any weight. My body fat wasn't going down, but so I was like, this is weird. So I go get my labs done, and I was pre-diabetic. And I'm like, what? My A1C was 5.7.
Wow.
And I was like, how is this possible? So this was before continuous glucose monitors. So I was literally pricking my finger every 20 minutes so I could see what was my blood sugar doing. And I was documenting it. And at 10:30 a.m., my blood sugar fasting started going up to 110. I'm like, that's interesting. So let me just see how this keeps going. So then 11, 120. By 1 o'clock, my blood sugar was like 130. And so we don't realize, like, if you don't have good adrenal function and your gut health probably isn't as good as you need it to be, and this is an extra stressor on the body, if you fast for too long, your blood sugar starts to go up. It's too much of a stress response. So, for me, I had to find out what was that balance. And I think that, with the fad of everybody intermittent fasting and let's eat as little as possible is not really great for people who are dealing with, thyroid issues or who are stressed and have, their adrenal glands aren't functioning at 100%.
Do you know anyone that's not stressed?
I haven't seen anybody yet.
Not yet.
But maybe, just in case somebody's out there.
So you go to the doctor and you have symptoms that you talked about already, and they draw TSH.
Yeah.
And it's normal. Well, you don't have thyroid problems.
Right.
Is that true?
Not usually. So it could be true.
Okay.
It could be true, right? So what happens is whenever they just do a TSH, first of all, that's not even made by the thyroid, right? It's a good indicator of thyroid function.
Where's the TSH made?
TSH is made in the pituitary.
Okay.
The name is thyroid stimulating hormone. So the pituitary in your brain makes this hormone to stimulate the thyroid, or to say, hey, thyroid, I need you to make some thyroid hormones. Okay. So the pituitary signals to the thyroid to make T4 and a little T3. And so there is a feedback loop to the pituitary. If your thyroid is making adequate levels of T4, then it kind of helps regulate that TSH. But it's only one piece of the puzzle. I mean, you could have a pituitary issue. I see it all the time. But they look at your T4, they look at your TSH, and your TSH could be totally normal. But you have all the other thyroid physiology that might not be normal, right? So I've talked about your thyroid makes T4, but then you have to convert it into T3. And there's a huge issue with a lot of people where they have an underconversion issue. So they have normal T4, their TSH is totally normal, but their T3 is very low. And T3 is what actually helps regulate your metabolic rate. And so there's actually 12 different thyroid markers that make up a full thyroid panel. Now, you don't have to do all of those markers every time, but if you're going to thoroughly evaluate someone's thyroid, there's 12 different markers, and usually only one of those gets run.
What are the most important ones to test when you're curious about thyroid function?
So TSH, T4, and there's total T4 and free T4. That's important because your total T4 is mostly bound by a protein carrier, so it's just carrying it around in the body. Think about if you were in New York City driving in a taxi cab, but you never got out of the taxi cab to go shopping. You never went and spent your money. You just keep driving around in a taxi and you don't get out, right? So that's kind of like what those protein carriers do. They're attached to the thyroid hormone, moving it around in the body, but it can't can't actually bind to the cell to be used if it's still bound to that protein carrier. So that's why it's important, because you can have an issue, like you can have normal T4, but your free T4 is really low. And the opposite could happen, right? You could have super high levels of free T4, but normal or low total. And so then you also want to look at T3. And I find hardly anybody is ever running T3. And I'm like, we'll get into why they don't do that in just a minute. But you want to order T3 total and free, so that we can see, is there an issue with underconversion of T4 to T3? And there's reasons for why that underconversion issue happens. And it's really important to understand that the body is usually not working against you. It's always working for you. It's working to help protect you. And it's like, why would the body protect you? Why would it slow down your metabolic rate on purpose? And that brings us back to what you said earlier, is usually if you have a high toxic load, it's trying to slow down your metabolic rate, because the faster your metabolism, the more free radicals you produce off of producing energy. And if your body can't clear that on top of the toxins, it's like, we got to slow this down here.
Is stress in and of itself a toxin?
Yes, you can. I don't know if I've ever looked at stress as a toxin. However, it acts as a toxin.
Too much stress.
Absolutely. And I think we get stuck in stress loops and we don't even know it, because we get addicted to stress hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And when the stress is gone, it feels really weird. Like it feels like an unknown circumstance, and you literally can produce stress hormones by thought alone. So the more that we worry about what could happen, we worry about what did happen, and we're not in the present moment, we literally keep ourselves locked in that stress cycle.
So we're looking at TSH, T3, T4, free and bound.
Yep, free and total.
What other tests are there that we should look at and try to get a whole picture of thyroid dysfunction?
So there's one other marker that I never see really run. It's reverse T3. And reverse T3 is almost like a breaker switch. When you have too much T4 in the body's going to protect you because you don't want too much T4. It just turns it into reverse T3 so you can get rid of it. So if your body is not converting T4 to T3, a lot of times doctors just keep increasing T4, like levothyroxine and Synthroid and all of those. But see, the body's like, I can't have more T3 and I don't need more T4. So I'm turning it into reverse T3 so I can just get rid of it. So reverse T3 is a really big piece of the puzzle. And then you also want to look at T3 uptake. That also tells us a little bit into estrogen and testosterone levels, and it's all really connected.
When you say T3 uptake, what does that mean?
Well, essentially T3 uptake is, I'm not sure of the exact mechanism of how that works, but T3 uptake is part of a traditional thyroid panel, right? And whenever I see T3 uptake low, it typically means that you have high testosterone.
And there's a lot of androgens in a high insulin environment.
That's right.
Which is a big factor, both adrenal and ovarian androgens potentially.
100% PCOS,
Yeah,
all of
which
that.
is rampant in our communities all over the globe, in America for sure. So I just want to kind of run down these because the thyroid testing part of it, and I'm a reproductive endocrinologist, but I'm mostly a fertility doctor. I'll take care of the thyroid problems in simplicity, but when they're complicated, because I just haven't had the constant training or the practice in that area, they go to the endocrinologist.
Yep.
But it seems to be such a difficult thing to keep in check that we're finding in the fertility world and in reproduction. It's going up and down in 1 week, and the patients are changing their doses all the time. So have we the other areas maybe to antibody levels? What are the few others that people may check that people may have heard of thyroid peroxidase, anti-thyroid antibodies.
Those two are critical. So thyroid peroxidase antibody and thyroglobulin antibody, when those two are high, it could be one or the other, or it could be both. That's really indicative of Hashimoto's, which we were talking about earlier. The other third antibody is Graves' disease, or the thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, but that would be for hyperthyroid typically. So you always run that if somebody's in hyperthyroid to diagnose Graves' disease.
And which is more common, hyper or hypothyroidism?
Hypo, for sure. Hypothyroid. And almost always it's because of this Hashimoto's or these high antibodies. And that's why it's hard to regulate the thyroid by looking at the thyroid alone. Because thyroid, especially when most people who have low thyroid have an autoimmune disease, it's not a thyroid issue. It's an immune system issue. So you've got to look at your blood sugar. You've got to look at adrenal function. You have to look at big swings with estrogen and testosterone because that's a trigger. You've got to look at food sensitivities. You've got to look at gut health. You've got to look at toxic load, mold toxins, heavy metal toxins, environmental toxins. So these are all the things that we're really looking at when you look at a patient, more of a complete workup, not just, okay, let's look at the thyroid, because nothing in the body, as you know, works in like
isolation.
In a separate system.
It's not isolated.
No, nothing. But our medical system is set up where everything is isolated. And so it's really important to kind of open and stop taking such a myopic look at the human body and say, okay, you've got an autoimmune disease. What are all the triggers for autoimmunity? That's how we're going to stabilize the thyroid, because you're trying to stabilize the thyroid up and down thyroid meds, whether it's T4 or T3, but you got this blood sugar issue over here that isn't resolved, and it's making the thyroid go up and down because your immune system. You've got all these toxins or food sensitivities, underlying infections. So you've got all these other things that are impacting the immune system, which is attacking the thyroid.
Could the food we eat be the antigenic, allergenic component that's damaging our cells, and specifically our reproductive cells? Because it seems like our reproductive cells, or testicles, or ovary, adrenals, thyroid glands seem to be big and quite commonly damaged by something. And I'm just wondering how much our nutrition may be directly affecting that. Seeds and nuts are highly allergenic, and people eat a lot of seeds and nuts, breads, pasta, and things like that. Are we missing the boat in that it's simply our food we're eating that's attacking the cells that creates the immune reactions?
So the way I understand it, first of all, when you have Hashimoto's, the research is showing that 100% of us have a gluten sensitivity. We don't have to call it an allergy, right? It's a sensitivity. Doesn't mean we have celiac disease. But what you're getting at is called molecular mimicry. So the molecule of gluten looks very similar to the molecule of thyroid, and also to the molecules of your cerebellum in your brain. And every single time you eat gluten, like a bite, it is going to cause the immune system to flare up, create all these antibodies. And not only is it attacking the gluten, but it's reacting to your thyroid and your cerebellum. Now, I haven't read the research that it's also, attacking the ovaries, but look, once you have one autoimmune disease, you are at risk for developing multiple autoimmune diseases. And so it doesn't really take a study for us to know in clinical practice, that the body is really responding, and you cannot calm that down if you are constantly eating foods that your body is reacting to. So the big ones for me, gluten, dairy, soy, and corn, that's where we start. That's the starting place.
Well, I always imagine what we breathe, drink, or eat, or what bites us or crawls in and out of us, and what colonizes us are generally foreign particles.
Yep.
These foreign particles embed in every nook and cranny of our body. They're not just going to the thyroid gland or this or that. They're going everywhere. And the glycocalyx, or the sugar layers of the cells of these organisms, are highly antigenic. I call them allergies. you said sensitivities, which is kind of interesting. See, I think they're all the same. It's just a symptom differences. So you may have redness, swelling, pain, discomfort, and heat in a skin. We see it. We're allergic to it, right?
Yep.
Or sneezing and sniffling and can't breathe, things like that. But what if the damage even to the thyroid gland is an allergic reaction, but at a cellular level, a DNA level almost, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is something that we don't think about. Goitrogenic foods.
Yep.
And maybe you could comment about the goitrogens. And the goitrogenic list is like greater than I ever imagined. But you said seeds and nuts, milk products.
Yeah, dairy, gluten, soy, corn, and all grains.
Right. And so ultimately, there's a tremendous amount of things that we're consuming, we're eating. Plus, these small particles of dust of these particles may get on other foods that we consume, and we don't even know it because of the cooking, the preparation process, or all of the industrial preparation of our foods. What are your thoughts on what can we do to make changes to what we're consuming?
So I want to just clarify something, because a lot of people think when they have an allergy, it's like anaphylactic.
Correct.
So like they're like, I don't have a problem with gluten. I'm like, but you literally have fatigue, you can't lose weight, you can't sleep, you've got anxiety and depression. And so they think, and their doctors tell them, like, you don't have an allergy to that, which is why I say sensitivity, because in the medical world, you can't say allergy unless it's an IgE response. That's technically an allergy. But you can have an IgM, you can have an IgG, you can have all these other allergic responses or reactions from the immune system, but it can't be called technically an allergy. So we say it's a sensitivity. Just for a quick example, my son, when he was like 5 or 6, all of a sudden he had a migraine. And I'm like, that's weird. This is interesting. So I'm like, his diet is so clean, I can't imagine why he would have a migraine. So, a couple of weeks go by, he gets another one. I'm like, wait a second, where did you go? And so what I found out was 48 hours on the dot after he would eat gluten at somebody else's house, he would get a migraine. And so a lot of people think if they eat something, they have an immediate reaction if they have a sensitivity even. And so it can be a delayed reaction, a delayed response, but we eat them so frequently, it's like you literally have this low-grade symptom and you can't really put your hand on what actually caused it. We've
normalized all this.
Yes.
And I had migraines as a child. I couldn't read, ADHD, OCD, lots of things. And so an allergy response is redness, swelling, pain, heat, dysfunction for it not to work right, but there's also cellular death and organ system death and the organism death. So I call them allergies because the modern medical system sort of separates that. You're sensitive to this. Well, there's an allergy happening somewhere in your body, but we in the modern medical system haven't acknowledged that. You're just sensitive. You can take this and it's okay. Yeah. But now I know for myself, who had significant diseases for years, it took me carnivore to be like, okay, wow, I don't have any of those symptoms anymore. Paleo helped. I think paleo and keto, it's kind of very similar, but paleo helped, keto better, and carnivore did the best for me. Yeah. Now, I know there are some things I can consume. I'm pretty good on cheese and milk products, dairy, but I'm not so good on seeds and nuts and vegetables also are not very good for me. So do you think, like anything for all of us, there's some sensitivities, I'll go there, that some of us are more sensitive and others are less sensitive, that we have no outward symptoms?
Absolutely. And that's kind of how I take my patients on that journey, is to so first, most of my patients start with the SAD diet, right? The standard American diet, Taco Bell, McDonald's, I didn't know people still ate there.
I used to.
I used to too. That's what I grew up on.
Yeah.
So they are just drinking loads of soda. So to take them from there to paleo is a big step. And so when you go from the standard American diet to paleo, you have lots of great outcomes, right?
Big.
Your body's like, oh, thank God I'm not getting like all of these inflammatory foods all day long and I'm eating better. And then you can progress more into ketosis. And ketosis is very important because even in paleo, I started doing paleo like 20 years ago before it was a thing, before there were all of these processed products. Like when I started, there was nobody even knew what gluten-free was. So I literally had to eat protein and vegetables and fruit. And so now you go into paleo and there's so many processed foods. And so I noticed like in the beginning, patients do really good. And then I see as I'm looking at their blood sugar, it's like, oh, almond flour crackers and almond flour muffins and all of this, other things that get into the diet. So then when you move into keto, I'm very careful about pushing people into ketosis and watching what vegetables they do eat. So meaning like no high oxalate vegetables, vegetables that are very low in lectins, and making sure they're eating plenty of protein so that they are not breaking down their muscle. And so then they really start to shift their physiology. And that's usually where most people are comfortable stopping. And then we have more like protein sparing intermittent fasting where you're still eating mostly protein, very low fat and like 5 grams of carbohydrates a day. And that's where people really move. But I think that a lot of people, they do it for, not my patients, because I'm educating the whole way. But a lot of times people do this as a fad or to lose weight and they don't realize the purpose why they're doing it and why they're getting great results because they're fixing insulin resistance. They are decreasing their allergenic load. They are calming down the immune system. So they have to find a way to stay in it like you have found. In order to make lifestyle changes. But a lot of people do it for weight loss and to get rid of the symptoms, and then they go back over here.
That's right. That's right. And the Atkins diet, and many people diet to lose weight. They feel better, but then they go back to their old thing thinking, oh, okay, I'm fine now.
Yeah. So it's so important to understand the education behind what's happening to you physiologically so that you do it for long enough, not just to get the weight off. So you have to go beyond that to truly look at your, your blood sugar and fix all of the ways that you might be showing insulin resistance and measuring and making sure that you're in a great space. And then to find the happy medium for your body. And everybody is different. So where you need to be so that you have a maintenance.
So I've got a low thyroid, hypothyroidism. And how do you treat that?
So for me, what I do is start with testing.
Okay.
First. And I again, not just testing the thyroid, but looking at all these factors. What's your toxic load? How are your adrenal glands functioning? What's your blood sugar looking like? What do your hormones look like? What does your gut look like? Are you having underlying infections? So I test broadly. Then after that, you say, okay, we got all these things. What's the highest priority? And so is it infections, toxins, blood sugar? Usually those are the 3. So you can't fix any of those if you don't fix a diet. So diet is part of that. And then you start customizing based on what the patient is really dealing with. And then 45 to 60 days later, you're doing another test. Are you on the right track? Are you moving forward? How's your body healing? Where do we need to adjust?
Prescriptions, medications. Where does that fall into this?
So this is really important. I'm glad you brought this up because when you're dealing with low thyroid, so we've already kind of established that most of the people who have low thyroid have an autoimmune issue. If your thyroid hormones go down, it triggers an immune response. So you have to have normal thyroid hormones. So for me, I'm a chiropractor. So I just make sure that all patients, I have a lot of nurse practitioners that work with me. So we have to make sure that their thyroid hormones are regulated, either by their prescribing practitioner or one of my nurse practitioners. A lot of people say, I took this levothyroxine, I took this Synthroid, I took whatever, and it didn't do anything. Well, I'm like, it probably did something, but stopping it because all of your symptoms aren't gone is probably not the way you need to go. So if the thyroid has been destroyed by your immune system and it can't keep up with thyroid hormone production, it is important that you supplement. It's important, and I say supplement, but you take the medication to keep your thyroid hormones where they need to be while fixing all this other stuff. Your body is so cool. It communicates with you in symptoms. So if there's an underlying imbalance, it's like, hey, I need some help here. I can't overcome this right now because I got all this stuff and I need some help. So you got to test to figure it out. So if your thyroid hormones are now stable on your medication, but you got all of these symptoms, it's because you didn't fix the underlying cause. You didn't fix the underlying imbalance. So you have to test, okay, where's the next imbalance that could be causing these things? So then if you look at insulin resistance symptoms, they're exactly the same as low thyroid symptoms. So people expect to take this thyroid medication and all the symptoms to go away, but they've got a raging insulin resistance problem. And so the thyroid hormones aren't going to fix the insulin resistance problem. They're going to fix the low thyroid hormones.
Curious, and is really thyroid disease just an insulin resistance or a hyperglycemic disease?
It's not usually primary. Most people don't have a primary thyroid problem. That's why they don't feel better whenever they take thyroid medication. So it's necessary to have adequate levels of thyroid hormone, but it's almost never primary. Your body doesn't just stop working.
Yeah.
It doesn't just say, oh, the thyroid gland's done by the time you reach 40. That doesn't happen. So there's other things that are at a more priority or a primary reason to low thyroid.
So over-the-counter supplements for thyroid, natural thyroid, porcine or other thyroid supplements like that, and then the prescription. Do you have any preference in what you like to see your patients use if they need those things?
Yeah. So if a patient has low T4, you're not going to get that in a supplement because all the pharmaceutical companies have a monopoly on T4, so it has to come in a prescription. But if you have normal T4, but maybe you have low T3, then that's where the porcine thyroid comes in that you can get over the counter, which is what I'm on. So for me, because I caught Hashimoto's really early, then I can limit or minimize the attack on the thyroid. So my thyroid is still making adequate levels of T4. It just needs a little help with that conversion. So you can get on a more porcine T3 hormone. Now, there's something that's really important. Most natural practitioners, or if you ask Dr. Google, they will tell you to take iodine. And when you take iodine and you have Hashimoto's, it actually makes the immune attack on the thyroid worse, which it looks like in labs that it's getting better, but it's the mechanism by which that happens stimulates the immune system to attack the thyroid even more. So for my patients, I take them off all iodine. You get plenty of iodine if you have a really good diet. Even carnivore, you get plenty of iodine in the meats that we're eating. So I take all patients off of iodine, which is why it's hard when you just go get a thyroid supplement because almost all of them have iodine in it.
Yeah, are we iodine deficient?
No. Mostly we're not. It takes 150 micrograms to have adequate levels of iodine. Most iodine supplementation is over 225 micrograms. And if you eat table salt, it's way high. which you shouldn't eat table salt. And they did a study in China. Hashimoto's was their very low incidence of Hashimoto's. And then they iodinized the sea salt, and Hashimoto's went up, I think, like 80%.
Interesting.
Yeah. So iodine is not the answer. We got to calm down the immune system.
Do we need supplements?
I like that question. So this is what I think. Diet is a huge part of what we're dealing with, and you cannot change and optimize human physiology if you don't get the diet right and you regulate your blood sugar. But on the other hand, there are toxins that create insulin resistance and disease. There are parasites and mold toxins and bacterial infections and viral infections that the body is dealing with. I personally like to deal with all of that with nutritional supplementation. But on a maintenance basis, like for me, the only supplement I take is vitamin D. And occasionally I'll support my adrenal glands depending on my stress load. But I am not on loads of supplements to maintain physiology. I'll take some glutathione because, we live in a toxic world, but I don't take multis. I don't take like loads of supplements because if you fix the body at a foundational level, and you then continue with a great diet, you really shouldn't need lots of supplements.
When we use the word Hashimoto's, we're talking immune cause of thyroid disorder, which is low thyroid.
Yes.
When we talk about Graves', what are we talking about there?
That is an autoimmune disease, very similar to Hashimoto's, but you're going to be more in hyperthyroid. So that's overactive thyroid, and it is more of a I would say like an emergency situation because you're going to be in hyperthyroid and you are at risk for heart attack, stroke, like all those crazy things whenever you go into hyperthyroid. But it's still an autoimmune condition. It's just the mechanism is a bit different. The crazy thing is that the treatment for that is to kill the thyroid. Whether you do it with radioactive iodine, you take the thyroid out, you take the victim out of the body. But nobody ever treats the underlying autoimmune issue. So
Remove the cause.
Yeah.
Change your diet, change your lifestyle.
They never fix any of that. They're like, here, let's just take your thyroid out. You're going to be fine.
I'm a standard American doctor that learned all of those things, by the way, that it's not your diet, doesn't matter, or your lifestyle, okay, drink less, and coffee's okay. So because I always like to say, okay, all these names that we've been given are so distracting. You either have a low thyroid or a high thyroid.
Yep.
Okay. And the treatments are different. The cause may be very similar, if not the same.
Yep. I think we get so wrapped up in the labels.
Yeah.
And you know what's crazy is all the labels and diagnoses nowadays is literally just a description, like a fancy name that they put on like fibromyalgia. Oh, okay, you have pain, so we're going to call it fibromyalgia. That doesn't tell us why it's there. It doesn't tell us how come it's there. It doesn't tell us how to fix it. It doesn't say any of those things. And so you just get wrapped up. A lot of people start to identify with these labels and they make it part of who they are, which makes it hard to heal from that because then they start to wrap their identity. A lot of patients will say, my cancer. I'm like, I'm just going to stop you. I'm not trying to correct you, but it's not your cancer. It's not yours. It's something that you dealt with and you're over that. You can't have that. And same goes with autoimmunity. Because there's tests out there that I could run and probably diagnose 10 different autoimmune diseases. But why would we do that? You've got to stabilize the immune system. I don't want them getting their head wrapped around all these other diseases when we just need to heal the body.
I've changed. I don't call them autoimmune. I call them immunologic.
There you go.
Because in fact, we don't know the cause of the reactive immune system.
Right.
And so I believe, again, our environment here gets in here.
Yeah.
No matter what, you breathe it, you drink it, you eat it, or it gets through your skin or some other place. And it's really our immune system is doing what it's meant to do, but you're overloading it, or it might be a speck of a peanut.
Yeah.
That's all it takes.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an interesting thing. Just so we have all these labels, and I always say, well, we have thousands of diseases. I don't know in chiropractic, how they label things, but in standard medicine, it's just thousands. I got to check the box, and I'm like, okay, you have inflammation from something you're breathing, drinking, or eating, and it's usually related to a plant sugar or some plant antigen or a plant chemical. I mean, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, nicotine, caffeine, alcohol are all kind of plant and microbial chemicals. And then the fermentation in our gut, which is the biggest thing. And so I want to talk a little bit about your regenerative farming and paleo a little bit. And then I want to talk about mindset a little bit.
Okay, awesome. My favorite things.
Yeah. So you live on a ranch, a farm?
Yep, I live on a regenerative farm. We moved there at the end of, we purchased a place at the end of 21. We moved from Colorado back to Texas. And it started out that my husband during COVID was like, hey, I think we should not be so close to the city. I had a huge garden at that time in the city. And so I was excited. We didn't eat tons of vegetables, but I was growing. I didn't have to go to the grocery store one time. And so I was like, sweet. And then he's like, I think we probably need to get a regenerative farm because even more and more was coming out about farming practices. I remember in COVID watching a documentary where the feedlots were killing the cows, like hundreds of cows. I'm like, I don't understand. Why wouldn't they just wait 6 months when the processing facilities opened again to process these? Like, it did not make any sense to me. So then it was like, oh, these cows were going to die. And then they would have an uncontrolled situation where these cows were dying. And I thought, why are these cows dying? And they're diabetic. Because why? What do we feed the cows? In a feedlot, loads of grains. You would be horrified. People would be horrified to understand and really figure out what they're feeding these cows. And their health is so bad, but yet we charge higher prices for more marbling of the meat.
Right.
So the cows are literally diabetic, and they were going to die and have all of these health problems if they didn't have a controlled killing of these cows. Like if they just had to wait 6 more months before the meat facilities were open.
Crazy.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I already ate grass-fed and grass-finished. I already had a consciousness around that and, organic. But the more you dig in and the more you see like where your fish comes from and what they actually feed chickens, and it's really horrifying. And when you look at even the pigs, what they are eating and the way that they raise pigs, I'm like, okay, I am passionate about this and I love animals, and it's to, dig a little bit deeper in our health and become more sustainable and take care of our family a little bit better. So we bought a farm or a ranch. They had horses there, and the lady played polo. I was horrified. They made a polo field and they scraped off all of the topsoil to make this polo field. And they're like, yeah, we could never get grass to grow.
Oh.
Of course you couldn't get grass to grow. You literally just took all the healthy soil off of this land. And, they tried to plant grass and so now it's actually starting to fill in. So I have all heritage breed animals. So I have Highland cows. We have hair sheep, so I don't have to shear them. We have chickens and turkeys and pigs and a donkey. A donkey to protect the sheep. So regenerative is all about the soil. So you are, my cows are eating the grass, but what kind of soil are they eating from? And it's so cool to see the full cycle because you have to move your animals, we move ours every 4 to 5 days to a different place so that they can drop their manure, stamp on the ground, kind of get up. And that's what starts to improve the health of the topsoil. And then we have these mineral boxes. So it's so cool. because I have them all separated out. A lot of ranchers and farmers just give like a big pile of minerals all together, but I can see what the land needs because, like, let's say they eat loads of magnesium. And their magnesium is completely depleted in their mineral box. So they're getting the magnesium because the soil is depleted of magnesium. But what happens, they poop the magnesium out back onto the land. And so then you get this constant regeneration and you're really improving the minerals and the bacteria all in the soil. So the more cycles that they go through, the healthier the animal becomes.
And it's important to know what you eats.
Yes.
And how does that change the animal for us?
Even down to the microbiome, right? Down to the microbiome of the soil is going to impact the microbiome and the health of the grass that they're eating. And, whenever you move the animals, and I treat my animals with functional medicine. So, like when we first got the cows, they traveled from Colorado to Texas and they were coughing. And so I, talked to the guy that brought them to me. He's like, "Oh, you need to go get them vaccinated." I'm like, "Huh. I don't think I'm going to do that. What else do you do?" He's like, "Oh, well, there's also a shot that you can give them." I'm like, I don't think I'm going to do that. So what I did, I only had 3 cows. So this is probably not easy to do on a large scale. But I said, okay, I'm going to do some research. So I got rosemary, thyme, and I got their alfalfa cubes, and I put a bunch of apple cider vinegar, and I made them a smoothie. So I fed them in big buckets, and it all cleared up in like 2 or 3 days. So anytime that they are having any of those issues, I just try to figure out what is it that they need. Do they need minerals? What can we do to support the health of this animal? And when you move them often, you are working with the cycles of the parasites. So it's so cool. So like the cows are on the land for like 5 days. Then you move them to the next piece of land so then they don't keep eating the parasites, right? So, but the parasite cycle is about 30 to 45 days. So you let the land rest for 30 to 45 days before they ever get back on it. And then you have chickens that you go in after the cows and they're eating the flies and use that for fly control, and they'll eat the parasites. And then also that's how you control parasites in sheep is you move them frequently. And the cows have different parasites than sheep and have different parasites than chickens.
The land, the soil, the grasses, and our truly primal system is broken.
Absolutely.
What can we do for those of us that don't live on a ranch, a farm, to improve our self and our family's health?
Find a local farmer. That is, the first step is to go to farmers markets or find a local farmer. You can get even deeper into that and find a regenerative farmer, right? So, it's good to go to a local farmer or a rancher, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of ranchers in Texas that don't do regenerative farming, that load their animals up still with antibiotics and hormones, and they don't have a consciousness around regenerative farming or even organic. So you got to find, and there are most ranchers who do regenerative farming. The only word I'm finding is a unique selling proposition. It makes them different than all the other ones. So they usually advertise that they're a regenerative farmer, or they may not be certified organic, because certifying everything organic costs a whole lot of money, and it makes it like small farmers can't really do that. But if you talk to the farmer and they're like, it's not certified organic, but we practice organic farming methods and we are regenerative. So they're not, loading their land up with glyphosate, but finding a local farmer and asking if they're regenerative and moving their cows and not feeding them grain is going to be important.
And finding, if you go to a butcher or a market, find out where that meat comes from is really important.
Yeah.
And the same goes with if you're eating any fruits or vegetables, know where it's coming from. And if they don't know where it's coming from, find out from somewhere else where you can get the food for where you know it's coming from.
Exactly. I think, I shop at Whole Foods every now and then too. And so if I'm buying meat there in a pinch, I'll just make sure it's grass-fed and grass-finished, no grain. And usually it's antibiotic-free and things like that. So you can still do it in like a grocery store, but you'll have to go to usually a natural grocery store to do that.
I always say dead people have no stress. But we don't want to go there yet.
Not yet. We're supposed to stay alive longer.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about stress in our lives and the suffering we all manifest in that stress and how we can ameliorate that and fix it.
So it's important to understand that when the body is in fight or flight, when we are in sympathetic overdrive, the body is not in a state where it can rest, digest, and heal, or get pregnant. So if your body feels like a tiger is chasing you, you're not in a safe place. Sex drive goes down. It's certainly not healthy to have a baby whenever you're being chased by a tiger. And why would you sleep? You're like sleeping with one eye open. And then, you need your blood flow to go to your extremities, not into your gut, so that you can actually digest your food. The body is meant to be in those states of fight or flight or sympathetic overdrive for short periods of time and then move back into parasympathetic, where we can rest, digest, and heal. But in our world, we're stuck over here. And even if we're not stuck there, we put ourselves there because that's what feels normal. We may have been there from a child. We may have been in that state from the womb because the mom was stressed out, right? So mom stressed out with a baby. You get all of those stress hormones circling around, and your body's used to having all that cortisol. You come out and you're like, where's that cortisol? Like, we got to create more cortisol because this doesn't feel normal. This doesn't feel right. So then you can be in that state, since that could be the only thing you ever know. I have patients that are like, oh, but Dr. Heather, I'm just a worrier. My mom was a worrier. My grandmother was a worrier. And they do a lot of hand wringing.
I'm a worrier.
Yeah, they have identified with that.
That's correct.
Their brain is programmed for that. That is who they see themselves to be. But we cannot stay there. The body's not to be there all the time, because that's when we start to develop these chronic degenerative states. So for me, first of all, it's recognizing. Like, I have patients recognize that they're there and they don't have to be there. And I ask them, I said, what are you worried about? Oh, I have so many things to worry about. Well, what are you worried about? My grandkids are in college, and, my oldest son lives, across the United States. I'm like, what is your worrying helping? They're like, nothing. I'm like, sometimes we feel like the more we worry, it shows people we love them. But it doesn't show anybody that you love them. It's only hurting your health. And so it's about recognizing and having an awareness around where the stress is coming from, especially if there is no stress, especially if there is no reason to worry. Like, I'm like, are they in jail? Are they on drugs? Like, what is the stress? We're like, no, but they could get in an accident. And I think, oh my gosh, if I thought about my son getting in an accident when he's off at college every day, I couldn't be productive or I don't know. I just feel like your body's never in a space to heal. So recognizing those thoughts, having a conversation with yourself that those thoughts aren't helping anybody. They're just keeping you in an addicted state of cortisol. And then what do you do? How do you get out of that? So you have to have a conversation with yourself, and you have to say, thank you for sharing, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. And I always tell patients to say, can you do something about it? Can you do something about it right now? Because this is a process I go through myself. Okay, if I can do something about it, I'm going to do something about it right now so I can get that out of my mind. Or if I can't do something about it, I'm just going to give it to God or universe or whatever you believe in, because it's out of your control. Like, you worrying about it is not going to help anything but make yourself sick. So I usually just tell my brain, thanks for sharing. That's not my problem. I'm not going to deal with that. And there's a lot of other things and we can talk about that you can do to get yourself from sympathetic into parasympathetic, so that you can start to retrain the body. That this is you have to get this place, the parasympathetic, more familiar than the state of stress, which is everybody's familiar.
Fight or flight, rest or digest.
Yep.
And reproduce, obviously.
Yes.
What are some of those other things?
So first of all, catching the thoughts as they come through, being conscious about that. The next thing I have patients do is go for a walk in nature. I do this every day. It's easy for me because I can just go pet my chickens, right? And I go for a walk out in nature, and and admiring the flowers or the vegetation at the time of the year, not thinking about the stress, but just being in nature and finding things that you can be at all with. Or, chickens are great listeners. So are turkeys. So your animals really do have a therapeutic effect. And then also exercise is really important, but not like, sometimes we can over-exercise, which pushes us more into the fight or flight. And I think a lot of people say, oh, I exercise, that's what I do for stress relief. And I'm like, what kind of exercise do you do? They're like, oh, I do HIIT and I run a marathon. I'm like, okay, that is not moving you into parasympathetic, right? So you can do yoga, you can, meditation is really huge, meditation or prayer. They say that 1 hour of meditation equals 8 hours of sleep. I haven't actually noticed that I need like an 8 hours less of sleep, but I do notice I get better sleep if I
sleep
meditate.
Great in 6 hours, and I've never felt better in my life. And I take a nap or 2 or 3, maybe. But I think meditation and prayer, you hit it in the right spot, because that's something most people aren't doing.
And there's more and more research coming out with meditation on how it exponentially changes your health, your microbiome. So the information that's coming out with meditation is so great. And so, sauna is a really great one too. And then also making sure that we get out in front of the TV. Like, so many people are still watching the 10 o'clock news, and the only thing that's at the 10 o'clock news is literally trauma.
It's fight or flight.
It's fight or flight. And then you expect to go to sleep after you watch the 10 o'clock news. I'm like, can you watch something that's like, I don't know, like a romantic comedy, or just go outside for a bit?
Well, I was hoping we were going to talk about world events and politics today, but we decided that was not part of the story.
We did.
and ultimately our phones or computers or televisions or even the negative thinking, gossip, and all the troubles of the world, I think if we give them up to God, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned prayer. Where does faith come in for our communities?
I think that, well, first of all, for me, I know that we were created by a higher power, and our bodies are born to heal. And I always, if you can have faith in that, like your body was born to heal, it's always trying to heal. You just got to help it along. It knows what to do. And so, the body knows way more than every scientist and every doctor. That is why we practice, because we don't know it all. And that is why we are still researching, because we don't know it all. But if you will just work with the body, it literally knows how to take care of itself. But you just got to limit all the load and the toxins and the stressors that we constantly are putting on the body. And I always, when I'm treating a patient that might be really struggling, and maybe even it's a puzzle for me to help this patient, I go back to the faith part of this, where it's like, I know for sure that this body is born to heal. So what am I missing? What toxin, what antigen, what thing is this body struggling with that we just haven't figured it out? Because I have seen so many miracles that I couldn't have even thought that I would see, but it's a way higher power than me.
Meditation, prayer, I think, are critical in healing all of us.
Yeah.
And if we simply focus on reading something that's uplifting and positive, having the conversation, listening or watching to those stories, because we're a story.
That's right.
And if you have to go to war, battle, do you take a Bible or Scientific America? It's the Bible.
I would take the Bible.
Bible all day long. All day long.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a chiropractor, we always think of chiropractic as adjustments, things like that. Is there a global healing concept in chiropractic that people need to understand about?
Yeah, the philosophy of chiropractic, which has gotten lost in kind of where we have been pigeonholed in society, but the philosophy of chiropractic is the power that made the body heals the body. And in chiropractic, you look at three main things that will cause dysfunction in the body, which is emotional, chemical, or structural. That is the philosophy of chiropractic. Now, a lot of chiropractors stop at the spine and they adjust the spine, which has huge implications because the spine and the nervous system affects every organ and every cell in the body. But then those of us who go a little bit deeper, you're like, okay, well, what caused the subluxation? Where is the chemical thing? I'm not going to keep adjusting the spine and expect some magical healing if somebody has insulin resistance, right? Like you got to fix the other issues. Or what if they have a chemical imbalance?
Yeah.
Or what if they are thinking negative thoughts every single day and they're telling themselves that they're fat? They're telling themselves, they're beating themselves up and they have low self-worth, right? So you have to go a little bit deeper. But in chiropractic, that's where I was taught to always ask the question, why? I was also given the philosophy that the power that made the body heals the body. So you just have to remove the interference.
Anything else you wanted to share with us today?
No, I think it's been a great interview.
It's really been a pleasure. Any questions for me?
Why do you do what you do? Because you're educated in the traditional medical model, right? And I think that so many people are looking for doctors that are willing to dig a little bit deeper. So why do you do what you do?
I think we're truly born to help heal, all of us actually. But we've been in such a stress environment, the sort of the gerbil wheel, it's nonstop. And I think I lived that for so long. And it was some suffering that opened my mind to alternative ideas that actually introduced me to my friend Steve, a chiropractor, my friend Craig, a philosopher, a Buddhist, a psychologist. And those kind of opened the door for me to begin to look at other things, yoga, acupuncture, massage, meditation. And actually, 25 years ago, I opened up a healing arts center within my fertility center because I saw all the stress and struggles that kept women, men, couples from either showing up or they left treatment early. And so that's when I brought these Eastern philosophy. And then I began to search into paleo and nutrition, which I had no idea was so important. And then I tapped into philosophy, meditation, prayer, and understanding God within each and every one of us. And really the healing power is from that higher power, which is God. And I've seen miracles that I sort of, and that was the couple who got pregnant on paleo diet. And plenty of people were getting pregnant on meditation and prayer, but it was, so I was like, okay, this all comes together. And I went into medicine to help, and I realized that I was hurting And nothing better than this in life is helping people succeed. And for me, reproduction is the key. But I've also realized and see it's every disease is caused by the same thing.
Yeah.
And we can tap into all of these things or just one of these things. So that's kind of the why part of it. And
That's awesome.
I love it. So, but thank you very, very, very much. What a pleasure that
you.
you've been able to come visit. And I hope someday I could come visit your farm.
Yeah.
It sounds amazing.
Well, we do health retreats there.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but
would you mention that about your health retreats?
So right now it's just for current patients. So it's more of like an advanced retreat. So we can go a little bit of a deeper dive and get into more of the meditation, the yoga, and really understanding where your food comes from and reconnecting to nature and God. And so, we have that a couple times a year, but I'm looking to expand it into like executive health retreats and corporate retreats. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, people are stressed and struggling. And if we could sort of help redirect the mind retreats. And I through my suffering, I went to retreats. I went to Tony Robbins. I was one of them, but many others I went to. And it was like, wow, this is an amazing place for healing.
Yeah.
And everyone should do it at some time. You
have to unplug. And I find that when we go on vacation with kids, that is not unplugging. We got to make sure everybody's ready and has their food and we're here and are they listening? And so we think that one time a year vacation is our retreat, but it is not.
Well, I'm flying tomorrow to Mexico for a couple of days for just a couple day retreat. My job is to turn things off with my wife, and but I'm get back into it. But I enjoy this. This is not stressful. The day of work. I mean, because I've gotten to the point where you realize you change the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly do that also. Like I structure my day where I have said, okay, these are my boundaries. I don't start before 10 a.m. I'm going to go play with my animals. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to eat a great breakfast. I'll have time to meditate. And then I'll start at 10. And I like these podcasts. How fun is it just to talk about what we're passionate about? And then to see people healing all day. And then, I've got a huge Facebook group where I see testimonials literally all day. So I don't feel stressed. There's certain things, of course, like employees and
right.
All that stuff. But if you balance that, where most of the time you're doing what you're passionate about and what you love, it's not that stressful.
Yes. Well, God bless and thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, where can people find you?
Oh, they can find me on Facebook. That's probably the best place to find me. I have a group of over 80,000 ladies now, and it's called Happy, Healthy, and Lean. And it's a huge group of ladies. We are very careful to make sure that they're all supportive. They're all kind of cheering each other on. And when you start to go down this health journey, if you're not surrounded by other women that are on the same track as you, it's really easy to get sidetracked. And you find, your friends that you've been hanging out with that have really bad habits, they would love to knock you off because you're essentially putting a mirror up to them.
Yeah.
And so, not that they're doing it, nefariously, but sometimes unconsciously. And so you've got to be surrounded by women who have the same mindset or who are on a similar journey.
Dr. Heather Stone, thank you for being here. We just love this conversation today. And so check her out. Happy, Healthy, and Lean. Take care.